Angela, you'll use this one. Are we ready? All right. Welcome to this gathering of the family of Jesus. We gather on lands walked for thousands of years by people of the First Nations. We acknowledge the history, culture, and spirituality of the signatories to Treaty 6 and remember our responsibility as treaty members. We also honor the heritage and gifts of Métis people. May we live the respect that our words offer. In the name of Jesus, peace to you. Blessed are you, for anyone is welcome here. Gathered here as a community, there are no conditions, no tests or requirements, no membership is required. Blessed are we, for everyone is welcome here. However you know your gender, orientation, race, culture, or faith, that's how we'd like to know each other. Blessed is all creation, for God is here and everywhere. This is God's world. God brings us action, grace brings us acceptance, and hope brings us inspiration. Our first hymn is Voices United, number 296. This is God's Wondrous World. Creator God, this world is full of different and similar, but no same. We gather here with all our similarities and differences, faults and imperfections, to share in the love that is for all. May your Spirit move among us, teaching us, guiding us, inspiring us to a life blessed with this truth, that we are all created in your image, perfect just as we are. Amen. So Kelly, who's our guest today, is also going to read a story that's being sent to Ponoka as well. So I don't know, Kelly, do you want to stand, walk around? Great, okay, thanks, Kelly.
Who's a doctor, and illustrated by Ken Min. Love is Love. I've got a problem. Today, some kids were laughing at my shirt. They were teasing me for wearing it. One of the kids said my shirt was gay. My friend asked, "What does that mean?" I wasn't sure, but I think it's because I have two dads. I told my friend I don't like it when kids say that being gay is gross, or they say, "That's so gay," when they don't like something. Some of the kids even said my family wasn't a real family. That's just mean, and it hurts. My friend told me maybe I shouldn't wear the shirt, but that doesn't seem fair. I wonder why some people think I shouldn't have two dads. Why would they think being gay is wrong? Maybe being different is scary to some people, but my dads really love each other, just like my friend's mom and dad love each other too. That isn't different. My dads got married on a mountaintop wearing skis. My friend's mom and dad got married on a beach, just wearing bathing suits. And my dads love me very much, just like my friend's mom and dad love her. We both have families who love us. That's not so different either. I know lots of other gay people. My teacher, Mrs. Adams, is gay. Police Chief Carter is gay too. And my sister's coach is gay. Mayor Sanchez is also gay. There are even lots of famous gay people. Singers and scientists and artists and athletes. My friend thinks that we might have a gay president one day. But some people believe being gay is something to be ashamed of. My dad's told me that some gay people even try to pretend that they aren't gay. My dads say that no one should be ashamed of who they are. That's why this shirt is so special. My dads gave it to me. I feel good wearing it. I love my dads, and they love me. We're not so different from any other family, and I am not embarrassed about who we are. So when some kids say, "Your dads are gay," I'll just say, "Yes, they are." And when some kids say, "You're not a real family," I'll just say, "Yes, we are." My dads love me, and I love my dads. That's what really matters. And I'm proud to be part of my family. Love is the same wherever you live, whoever you are, and whomever you love. Love is love.
We hear your word, O God, but find listening to be the hardest part. Help us to understand what you are saying to us. Guide us to the right path and inspire us to step out on the journey of learning and living. Amen. Sandy, are you reading scripture? I have need the Bible for scripture reading. I didn't know I was reading it, but I am now. Our scripture reading today is Luke 6:17-26. He came down with them and stood on a level place with a great crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea, Jerusalem, and the coast of Tyre and Sidon. They had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, and those who were troubled with unclean spirits were cured. And all in the crowd were trying to touch him, for power came out from him and healed all of them. Then he looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for surely your reward is great in heaven, for that is what your ancestors did in the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets." So we're going to welcome Andrea and Kelly to the front. Kelly Henry describes themselves as a queer artist, educator, and a cat lover. He uses they, them pronouns and is currently based in Edmonton. They're a member of the Gates United in Red Deer, and we invite them to share their story with us today, and Andrea will be the interviewer, so we get to hear it.
Okay. So to start off, will you please tell us about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my full name is Kelly Margaret Milne Henry, and I go by Kel, I go by Kelly. I've recently, kind of as you said, been trying out the they, them pronouns. And one of the questions I've got from my peers at school, because I'm at Concordia right now, is, well, what if I make a mistake? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I call you Kel, or what if I use she? And I'm like, I'm not going to get mad at you. I know you're coming from a place where you're trying and you're interested and you want to know the story of like who I am and why I am the way I am. And I think kind of when Andrea and I were talking this morning, that's one of the biggest things, is coming from a place of kindness and asking questions and trying. And that's certainly a big part of it. And in the United Church, I think there's like a really good history of that. And we know that the church has always been involved with social justice. And growing up in the church, I thankfully grew up in a time where it was totally okay to be, an other, using a different label. And my grandfathers are both United Church ministers. My aunt and uncle are both United Church ministers. So the idea of coming out was never something that worried me in terms of family, because I knew, that our family and our church family would be accepting of me. And I think that's really a testament to how far the church has come over the decades, that there are people like me who are like, oh, like, maybe it's like okay, and I don't have to like worry about it, and it doesn't have to be this like really big, scary thing. And even, I mean, I remember when I kind of first started choosing what labels to use for myself, I was early 20s and kind of learning about this language that's out there around, sexual orientation and gender identity. So around like 2012, I was kind of like, okay, like maybe I could use like this word bisexual to describe myself. Maybe that's like an okay label. And then just kind of in this last year, as I've been doing some more work in the community in Edmonton and around Alberta and learning even more, because there's so many words, there's so much vocabulary in the kind of LGBT community. So using kind of they, them pronouns comes with like all of these words that I can use to describe myself. And, whether it's non-binary, whether it's genderqueer, whether it's queer woman, whether it's trans woman, there's like just too many options. So when I was talking to my therapist about this and this idea of coming and talking to people about my story, I was like, I don't really have a story. Like, I've been surrounded by love, and that's a beautiful thing. And
Sort of a story in itself, though,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I suppose so. And so my therapist kind of said, well, just use the word questioning. Like, if you're not sure and if you feel like you're not an authority on the subject of which word to use, it's like, there's a reason language is fluid, and there's a reason the spectrum of gender is fluid and identity. So yeah, I'm kind of coming to a place today of knowing who I love, but questioning who I am. And that's a bit scary, because you're like, oh, I thought I figured this out, like you go through life kind of knowing who you are, but then you're like, oh wait, there's more words to use.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Do you find people try to give you a label when you don't have one for them?
Sometimes, yeah, and there's interesting aspects of it when I talk to people kind of in the queer community, that older generations are like, oh, you're using the word queer, like that's really kind of loaded, like that's something that we need to kind of think about, because it was a slur for such a long time, and the community's kind of said, well, younger people are taking it back. Like that's a word that people are more comfortable with because it's a little broader. Mm-hmm. So yeah, within the community, some people try and say which words to use. And then, even kind of allies and people who are learning about it, they like check boxes, right? They like the idea of like, okay, this is the label that you use and who you are. So when I kind of give people like 3 or 4 labels, like non-binary, genderqueer, queer women, they're like, oh.
Can you explain some of those to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the work that I do, we found a list of definitions from Action Canada, which is a wonderful website that kind of gives like a concrete definition. And the way that, I define it for myself, and then the way that other people might define it, there might be discrepancies. So when I think of the words non-binary, that to me means that, like if we think about kind of male on one side and female on the other, that non-binary could be completely outside that. Like if we think of like a line and then like some dots like way off the line. And so one thing that Action Canada does on their website is they show galaxies. Oh, cool. So as a different way of thinking, like rather than 2 check boxes or a spectrum, it's like, well, let's look at like these ideas. So when it comes then to kind of genderqueer, it's like, okay, well, let's go back to that line of male, female. And it's like, well, maybe on one day I'm like in the middle of the line. So maybe some days I'm outside the line and maybe some days I'm like in the middle. And then you can also like think of it as like a sliding scale. So like one day I might slide a little bit more towards female and another day I might slide a little bit more towards male. And then, yeah, queer woman, I think is kind of similar to that genderqueer for me, that idea of like that queerness, but not being fully like cisgender, being kind of matching my experience with my body. So it's...
And cisgender is meaning that you identify with the gender you were born with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah? So when the doctor said, oh, it's a girl, and you're like, yep, that checks out, that's that cisgender, that kind of matching of the physical body and the psychological and spiritual. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like the concept that I like two concepts. that it's a galaxy, like you say. Like I've thought of the concept of it being a spectrum, but I've never thought of it as being outside more than a spectrum.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And when I work with youth, I think part of it that is so appealing is that idea of infinite possibility.
Yeah.
And when you're on a line, there's still a little bit of limitation there. But when we think about like creation, there's a lot out there. So different things speak to different people. Absolutely.
I also like the concept of it changing from day to day, and can you even say more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the kind of mentors that I have talked a little bit about what we call like the genderbread person. So if you can picture a gingerbread person in your mind, what you dress the gingerbread person in, that's their expression. And that's what they kind of project to the outside world to be read in a certain way, to be perceived in a certain way. So if I, show up to a meeting in like a suit and tie, that might mean that I'm feeling like a little bit more masculine that day. But if I, am going out on the town and I want to wear a dress, like that expression is associated with femininity, and kind of blurring those lines sometimes. Like, well, what if I wear like, a suit and a skirt? Like if I'm wearing a tie and a skirt, it's like, okay, we've got that kind of fusion. So what you're dressing the gingerbread person as, that's like their expression, that's the outward appearance. But then when we think about, okay, well, what's in our brain? And if I kind of wake up one day and feeling like, like I'm all about this body that I have and this skin suit that I'm walking around in, this in God's image kind of thing, maybe in my brain that day, it's like, okay, I want to feel more feminine that day because that's kind of the way I was made. That's my genetics. And then we go to kind of the bits, the parts, so that assigned sex. So if I'm filling out paperwork and it's legal and I have to talk to the government, like, okay, well, I'm going to check off that F box because that's what I have to do. But I was filling out paperwork for like a fitness club the other day and realized I'm like, this piece of paper isn't really that binding like between me and this fitness club. So I'm just not even going to fill out the gender box. Like it's just not worthwhile to me. I probably could have drawn my own box or like maybe a star or like a heart or something just to give it back to them with a little bit of a that's what I think of your boxes. But yeah, so this idea of what we express to the world, but then also what we think about ourselves, kind of what our doctors need to know about us, all of these different things just to make up gender. Right. And then let's combine that with being married, all right, and having a relationship with someone else, and that attraction to another being, and that's kind of where it might get like a little bit messy. Yeah.
I might be going off the script a bit.
That's fine. Okay.
So do you find that you sometimes have problems explaining your marriage to people because it appears a certain way?
Yeah. One of the words I use is invisible minority. So if, my husband and I go to an event where people maybe don't know us, yeah, you're right, we come off as this, heterosexual married couple, very traditional, male-female. But depending on the event and depending on the people there, I have to kind of make a choice. Like, is this a situation where I'm comfortable kind of outing myself? Is this a situation where I have kind of allies in the room? And it's interesting, I met someone from Scotland a couple years ago, and they were like, so like, how do you be in a marriage and still be bisexual? And I'm like, well, at the end of the day, I made a commitment to this guy and to God, and like that doesn't change. And the story that I like to tell people is my husband and I met when we were teenagers, and he told me I was bisexual. I didn't know at the time. And I was like, oh, that's a word. And like at 16, 17, I was like, I don't really like that word. I don't really know, like that doesn't fit. And so then obviously, like, I grew up and was like, oh yeah, he was right. Yeah, don't tell him I said that, but he was right. And then when I came out to my parents, this was after we were married. Yeah, my parents were like, well, how does this affect Matt, my husband? And I'm like, well, he figured it out a long time ago. So like, he's not worried about it. He's been able to accept me even before I was able to accept myself. So, and it kind of becomes a bit of a running joke in our household that, he's a tradesman, so he goes up north. And we were talking a little bit about kind of the gender politics of the trades in Fort McMurray. And I guess some of the guys on his crew had some really jealous girlfriends and wives. And Matt said to his coworkers, yeah, my wife would just want me to like check them out and report back. Like, like it's a very different dynamic between the two of us. But yeah, when I talk to people about it, I kind of have to walk that line of, is this someone that I can joke around with? Is this somebody that I can kind of talk to? And also, am I willing today to kind of do the work of being out? And it is a constant, like, when you meet someone new, you're like, okay, so hi, I'm Kel, I'm a teacher, and I'm bisexual. Like, it's not something you introduce yourself with. Right. So like trying to like find kind of subtle ways to like suss out, is this person an ally? And that can be like, emotional work. So I don't always choose to kind of interrupt that narrative, but if Matt and I are somewhere and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, like we're a married couple, but there's a little more nuance to that. Yeah.
So I think in a way, by coming out as a married person, you're helping people understand that it's a part of your identity and who you are, not just when some people think it's like you're choosing who to date. Yes, I guess in a way. You're not dating anymore. You don't need that. Yeah. So it's kind of just a show that I still want certain people to know this because this is who I am.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
I dropped my papers.
That's okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, can you tell us more about, just a second.
I think we've talked about me enough.
Yeah, okay. Tell us about what you do more.
Yeah. So
especially
I'm
your job.
Training to become a full-time teacher, but I'm working part-time at a place called Compass Center for Sexual Wellness. And I go to elementary schools and junior high schools and senior high schools, and I teach sex ed, basically. And Compass comes to the classroom with an approach of being inclusive, being affirming, and wanting kids to ask questions, because that's how we learn. And when you have people who are knowledgeable, not just Google, you have that opportunity to learn and to ask questions. And the favorite part of the presentations are the last 15 minutes of anonymous questions, because kids want to learn, kids want to know, and the vocabulary around bodies and around relationships, it's out there. Kids know these words. It's just a matter of giving them good definitions. So part of what I'm doing is with students, but I'm also this week talking to teachers, which is really interesting as someone who is like still a baby teacher, going and talking to veteran teachers about like, okay, this is what you need to do in your classroom. And Edmonton Public is really good. They have these stickers that teachers can put on their doors to say like, this is a safe space, and it has a rainbow on it. And that's something that I have in my music studio as well. And even having like the sidewalk that Bashaw United does, that rainbow kind of leading to the door, and around the building having rainbows. It's just such a visual clue to people that, hey, this is maybe a place where I can find someone to talk to. That this is a place where I can be myself, or I can figure out who I am. And one of the things we talk about with teachers and with adults is saying, okay, you've got the rainbow sticker, you've got the rainbow sidewalk, but like, what actions can you like take and like follow up with that? So language, I think, is like a really big thing. And in my grade 2 classroom this past fall, I went by Mix Henry. So instead of being called Mrs. Henry, MX, Mix Henry. And the students totally rolled with it, didn't bat an eye. But the teachers in the staff room, they wanted to ask questions and they wanted to learn more and they wanted to know what's all that about. And usually what it ended up being was like a one-on-one conversation, because if you're in front of like 30 kids and trying to wrangle them all and trying to like get their books out and everything, okay, that's not maybe the best time. But if you have like a moment in the hallway at recess where you're like, like I haven't had a chance to talk to you yet, but can you like tell me a little bit more about this MX thing, this mix thing? And just being willing to ask those questions showed me which people in the building were safe people. So one of the things that I found that I quite like are little like name tags, and it has like my name is Kel, my pronouns are. So it's got those 2 lines on the name tag. So if I have like guests coming into my classroom and my students need name tags, maybe it's a substitute teacher, maybe it's a field trip presenter, they can have those, and it's not only affirming for the students to kind of write their own names and write their own pronouns, but it's also a clue to the presenter that this is a safe space and this is a place where we, don't tolerate discrimination. And it's also showing the presenter that if they are a minority of any kind, that they are welcome here and that they are safe here. So a lot of the actions that we take, they're good for us, they're good for our students, and they're good for the community. There's that kind of knitted together effect, that holistic thing where we really need to realize, okay, what am I doing? And who does that impact? Because they're not hypothetical people. They're real people in the room. And especially with students, if they're 8 years old, they might not know everything about themselves yet. Yeah. But if they can think back, like when I was in grade 2, like I remember we did this thing and we talked about love is love and we had this discussion. And maybe, as a 13-year-old, I can now start to figure out and think back and have that safe person in the school. And that to me is a lot of what being out as an adult is, and being an ally as an adult is kind of thinking about this kind of next generation and the words we're using with them, but then also thinking about, I'm doing this action kind of maybe as like started by and prompted by children, but it's actually benefiting so many more people in the community. And maybe somebody who is closeted and middle-aged now realizes, there is a place for me and there is a safer space. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome. So there's, with your words and visually, you can sort of show that you're a safe person, you're an ally. Mm-hmm. Are there other, like if I were to go, say, into a classroom, but the topic of the day was unrelated, I guess. Yeah. Is there a way that I could go in and still show that I'm a safe person?
Yeah, absolutely. And so things like saying, all right, good morning class, good morning everyone, rather than that boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. And also saying, if you're telling a story about yourself, whether or not you're using the word, partner or spouse or husband or wife or kind of those words and even interchanging between them. Just to kind of show kids like there's a lot of vocabulary out there. I also think books are really excellent. Like you can find books about science that are still representing minorities, and you can find books about math that are still inclusive. Mm-hmm. Not only having like your words and your showing, but also that role modeling piece, so that if you hear people in the community or in the classroom or wherever you are talking, and maybe they're using a word that you're like, that's a bit of a problematic word. It's really important to call them into conversation rather than calling them out on using a wrong word. So one of my student teachers that I work with mentioned a story of there was a student who was using they, them pronouns, and rather than the student getting angry every time someone misgendered them, they would say, Mix Henry, remember that I actually use they, them instead of she. So just like a really kind of casual one-time correction and keeping it low-key. So if someone does kind of use a word, or you hear a student or you hear a kid say something, just stopping if the moment allows, if it is like a small group or one-on-one, and saying like, hey, like, do you know what that word means? Like, do you know why you're saying that's so gay? Do you know like what that means? And opening up that conversation rather than saying, don't say that, right? Because that just shuts it down. That stops the conversation from happening. But coming from a place of questioning is really helpful to kids. And being on top of it, right? Like like I was saying, like to do it every time, to come out every time, to correct someone every single time. I don't have the energy for that. But realizing that, okay, is there a time and a place where I can correct someone? Is there like an appropriate moment that's maybe not in front of 30 people, but maybe I can go find them afterwards? And you kind of have to play each moment by ear, but we see that in the classroom all the time, that if a kid is shouting out, like if you're reading a story and a kid's like, that's so gay, it's like, okay, we're going to close the book and we're going to have a conversation, like, because we don't say stuff like that in our classroom, and like, let's talk about why. But if it's at recess and you hear a kid on the playground and there's like 2 or 3 kids running around and you're the like adult nearby, walking over to them and being like, hey, like, that's a hurtful word, and that's not something we do at school, or that's not something we do at church. And I think just like getting that conversation started and like helping kids use that terminology, and realizing too that we're going to screw up as adults, right? Like there's times that I'll walk into a room and say, all right, boys and girls, I mean everyone, but just, just kind of rolling with that punch, being like, oh, okay, screwed up, just going to keep on going, and not making a thing of it. Yeah.
How would that approach change when it becomes adults that you're talking to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think since adults come with a lot of preconceived notions about sexuality and gender, that idea of calling in. So when I'm, at the pub with some friends, and we're talking about whatever news story of the day about, let's say, gendered bathrooms, and having gender neutral bathrooms, that kind of taking a moment and looking at who the audience is, that if I'm getting really fired up about something someone is saying, kind of recognizing in myself, okay, why am I having this emotional reaction? Is this something that I need to have right now? Like I don't want to carry this anger with me, but just like maybe asking my friend who's, maybe spouting an opinion like, oh, like this isn't necessary, this isn't important, and being like, okay, why do you think that? And have you talked to someone who it is important to? And realizing that there's more than 2 sides to a story, right? There's your opinion, there's the media opinion, there's the kids who it's affecting, there's the adults who it's affecting. So when I'm talking to adults, I really have to kind of just take that moment of like, all right, I'm okay. Maybe I'm a little upset, maybe I'm a little frustrated with this person, but I still need to be kind. I still need to call them into this conversation and recognize that they're saying what they're saying for a reason. And as hard as it might be, as much as I might disagree with someone, realizing that, I'm not going to change any minds by saying, oh, we don't say that anymore, or I don't want to talk to you about this, and shutting them down. And it's definitely kind of like I was saying, depends on your audience and your venue and where you are and what you're doing. Like if you're out for a walk and it's like 2 people, it's probably really easy to have that conversation. But if you're in front of your peers and there's 10 people there and someone's making a sexist joke, it's a little bit harder to be brave. It's a little bit harder to stand up in that moment. And I think that's where all of our technological tools of communication are really wonderful, because you can go and text that person afterward and say, I want to talk to you a little more about this. And this thing you said is really sticking with me. And it is an act of bravery to be that emotionally vulnerable, whether you're an ally, whether you're straight, whether you're trans. It's that kind of putting yourself out there and be like, am I opening up a can of worms? Probably. Yeah.
Okay. Checking in on the time here.
Yeah.
I think we're still okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Should we talk a little bit about the church and actions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that for next. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have so many thoughts going on in my head. Okay. Yes, let's talk about the church.
Sure. So when I was talking with Robin about coming today, and I'm like, well, I want to talk a little bit about myself, and I want to talk about the work that I do, but I think it's really valuable to the congregations to walk away from this conversation with actions in mind. Steps that you can take as an individual to be more affirming, to be more inclusive. And, I've touched on quite a bit already when it comes to language and what words you use and how you present yourself and what you put up for art in your building. But kind of those like little things that maybe slip between the cracks. And I've touched on paperwork before, but if you're thinking of, okay, if new members are walking in the door, people are wanting to come to the door, when they come into the building as either a gender minority or a sexuality minority, what do they see? And kind of that lens. And the kind of two things that came to mind for me is thinking, okay, well, they're going to look at the building in terms of bathrooms, like where can I go and what can I use? And also, if the church wants to get in touch with me, am I filling out a kind of cookie cutter labeled box form, or is it like kind of open-ended questions like, what name do you like to be called? How would you like us to like contact you and address you, whether it's Mr. or Mrs. or Mix or Doctor or Sir, whatever you want to call it. So kind of looking at, okay, what paperwork do we have in the building and what brochures do we have around, and what are the words on this brochure saying to these real people? Because they're not hypothetical. They're people in the community. They're people, whether it's coming in for a concert, whether it's coming in for a potluck, like people are looking and they're noticing. So, we've got like the physical structure of the building, we've got the paperwork kind of part of it, but I really think the biggest actions that people can take is asking questions differently. So when you're introducing yourself to someone, kind of taking that risk and being like, hi, I'm Kel, I use they, them, what's your name and pronouns? And it's a bit awkward the first few times you do it, and you might stumble over it and you might not be sure. And even with like kindergartners, they're like, what's a pronoun? And you're like, all right, we gotta go back to basics here. So, adults will understand that a little bit better, but even, when I've invited adult students to my music studio, and either we're texting or emailing, and I'll say, like, what salutation do you want? Like, what pronouns do you want? There's kind of people pause, and they're like, what? What do you mean? What are you asking? Because we're not used to that yet, because, we have come from such a long history in the Western world of this dichotomy that to challenge that narrative is going to take practice, right? And you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to forget to ask about someone's pronouns, and you're going to, be like, okay, next time I'm going to do it. Next time I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to ask, and I'm going to say, my pronouns are such and such. So kind of that initial point of contact with a person, with someone new, and when you're then getting to know them a little bit better, asking questions like, rather than, do you have a boyfriend, do you have a girlfriend, saying like, are you seeing anyone, are you interested in dating, just kind of those more neutral questions that are a little bit more open-ended. And I think too, a question that I really like when I meet people is I say, what brings you joy? Rather than saying, what do you do for a living? What brings you joy? Because that's going to let people open up and talk. And they're going to be like, oh, this person like actually cares. And they're like interested in what's going on in my life. So just thinking about kind of asking questions a little bit differently. I think that's a really big one. And then if you kind of want to go beyond the building, let's say, so we've talked about, okay, how can we set up our coffee time? How can we set up our bathrooms? But then when we kind of go out into the world, and if we're connecting the church to the community and we're connecting it to the province, just looking at, okay, what businesses are we working with? What artists are we working with? And are they, affirming as well? Do they have an explicit policy about, sexual orientation and gender? And sometimes to find that paperwork is work. So as I'm applying to different school districts in British Columbia and Alberta, I'm going onto those websites and I'm looking, what's your anti-bullying like policy? What's your, harassment situation? How do you support staff? How do you support students? Do you have, a gay straight alliance in your school? And so kind of doing the homework on those businesses, on those partners, to then be like, okay, this is someone like we have shared values. We have like a shared alignment. And that's one thing working for Compass, we are an Edmonton Public approved educator. So I can go to any public school in Edmonton and talk about sex ed, but I'm not approved in the Catholic system because it's just such a different ball of wax that to have someone come in and talk about that, like the values aren't the same. So, whether you're, in Bashaw, whether you're in Red Deer, like there's businesses out there and there's kind of databases that you can find of, okay, these are like companies who sponsored Pride. These are companies who had a float in a parade, and looking at their past behavior and how they are supporting the community. And I think too, especially when it comes to like art, right? There's a lot out there, and whether it's politically motivated art, whether it's just enjoyable, whether it's abstract, whether it's realistic, looking at, okay, what is, if we're going to hang a painting somewhere, what is this saying to people from different lenses, from different backgrounds? And if you're going to host a concert, realizing that, maybe this person is really struggling financially, and maybe they have faced a lot of discrimination. So what can we do to empower their art? And how can we get them to have a concert, get them to have an art gallery viewing, like something along those lines? And then if you want to learn more, of course, yes, there's like lots of information online, but there's like certifications you can take, there's training you can do, and that's always a really good thing, not only as administrators of a building, but also as members, right? Like it's good not just for kind of the top-down trickle effect, but to think too about like, okay, like I'm a informed, educated, active citizen, and if it's like a $50 online, 4 weeks kind of course, like, is that something that I have the energy and the financial ability to do? And the resources are out there. It's just a matter of taking the time yourself, right? And looking for them, because I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the websites. I can show you a few, but at the end of the day, it's the work that you put in as an individual and the growth that you can go through to learn and what words to use and when to use them and how to talk to people. And it doesn't happen overnight. And when I think about the process of becoming an affirming church through the United Church, there's a lot of pieces to it beyond just having like a label that you kind of slap up, a sticker that you put on your door. There's that, okay, am I willing to talk to someone? If someone walks through these doors and says, I need help, how can I help them? I'm not an expert in everything, but who can I connect them to? Who do I know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm curious to know if you know, like for example, we're having someone come in to lead grief workshops once a week very soon. Is there such a thing for a workshop that would help educate people around these topics?
Absolutely. So one of my coworkers is a professor at the U of A, so he does workshops, Brian Parker. There's the Alberta Society for the Promotion of Sexual Health. They come in and do workshops. There's the Sexual Assault Center of Edmonton that they go around and they do workshops.
Lots of options.
Yeah,
That's great.
And
That's
I
awesome.
have like a business card that has like 10 websites.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get that from you.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Is there anything else church related, especially?
I think I'm just really happy that more churches are thinking about this and being affirming and realizing, and I get to brag about the United Church being like one of the early equal marriage proponents. I'm like, you want to come to my church? Like, we're really accepting. and when I encounter people of different faiths, whether it's at the Buddhist temple or whatever, I can always say like, if you're feeling a little bit like your religion or your church building or something like isn't doing what you need it to do, come to the United Church. We love all faiths. We love all orientations. And that's something I think like the church has been a leader on in the last 30, 40 years. And it's, I think it's really important not only for the United Church's reputation to continue this work, but it does show kind of in those localized communities. And I love hearing things in rural Alberta, because I think there's definitely a big stereotype around Albertans and our general approach to sexuality and gender identity. So to have, like a church in rural Alberta being affirming is like, that's what we need. That's the news we need. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, last thoughts. I guess maybe that was last thoughts.
That was my last thought.
Okay, last thoughts. Thank you.
If you want more websites or books, like I have lots that I can email and send out and leave behind. So yeah, let me know.
Thank you so much, Kel.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you were able to come today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next hymn is from More Voices, number 145, Draw the Circle Wide. There's a time in our prayer for you to name persons, concerns, and celebrations you would like to share as a community. Please feel free to speak boldly at the appropriate time in the prayer. Thank you, God, for love. We may call it wonder at your creation, joy in the lives we share, faith in our today, hope in our anticipation of tomorrow. We may call it any of the ways in which we encounter you, but at its heart, we find ourselves in your love. For that, we can only be thankful. But the world is a complicated place, God, and wonder must be engaged with. Joy must be shared. Faith and hope must be lived everywhere and everywhen. And so we ask you to hear our prayers. More than the words of our mouths and the thoughts of our minds, hear the depths of your love in our hearts as we pray. For those who struggle to find their way and truly know themselves, for those who feel challenged by the journeys of others, and for all who would support them on their way. For those who suffer injustice at the hands of those who wield power as a weapon, and for those who have lost their way to the power they sought. For the poor, the weak, and the helpless, and for all who seek the strength to bring them hope. For the tired, the sad, and the lonely, and all who would bring them care, compassion, and friendship. For those who have experienced loss in the death of a loved one or the brokenness of a relationship, and for those whose path has taken them in new directions. For those whose living has gone cold and dark, bring them the warmth of an embrace and the light of a friendly smile. In this time of worship today, we bring to you those persons, concerns, and celebrations dear to us that most especially need your strength and love, and we name them now as a community. And now, O God, we are one in prayer, but bring our own thanks and our own concerns. If some need to say, help me, or save me, or hold me, or forgive me, let these be spoken now in the confidence of our hearts. These and all our prayers, we gather together in the prayer which Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Our last hymn is Voices United, number 691. As we go from here, may our every action proclaim justice and hope. May our every word proclaim our joy and compassion. May our every heartbeat proclaim our love in God. For we go in peace. We go with God's blessing. Amen. Here is your minute for mission.